With that, we'll try to record this and see how it goes here and post this over on our YouTube page, taking a look at Week 14. I'm ATS Radio host Adam Burke, joined by Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. And Brian, let's go ahead and start with this Thursday night game between New England and the Rams. You have posted a solo video, or you've recorded a solo video for us over on our ATS YouTube page for this one. Rams -6, total 44.5. New England stays on the West Coast on UCLA's campus because they just played the Chargers in this same SoFi Stadium venue this past weekend. What do you think about this Thursday night game? How does this one go for the Patriots?
Well, I like the Rams, and give Belichick credit. He's figured out a way to compete and get back in the race. They're at 500. So they're in the hunt, so they're still motivated. But Adam, how many weeks we've been talking about this on this podcast? It's one of the real moneymakers we've had this year, and that's just sit back and watch the New England game and come in and jump in the pool at halftime. If they're ahead, you play them because they're ahead. Obviously, the plan they've got is frustrating the opposing offense more often than not. And they run the ball either with Newton or a bevy of running backs, and they can control the pace of the game. But if they're behind, Newton can't bring them back. I mean, they destroyed the Chargers. And what did he even have 100 yards passing in that game?
No.
So you're going against the Rams with Donald and Ramsey. That defense can be a mittful. And the rub would be there are days when Goff gets sketchy. And what is Belichick taking away here? It's like, the Rams do spread it around pretty good. Maybe points are at a premium in the game. But I don't see the Patriots generating hardly any offense at all against the Rams. I really don't.
No, I don't either. I think it's Rams or nothing here in this one. And obviously, it's an interesting spot with New England, staying out west. Obviously you got the pandemic. You've got very strict restrictions in California. So all they're going to be focused on is football. So they should be very well prepared for this game. But to me, I think when you look back at what New England did to the Chargers this past weekend, that was a referendum on Anthony Lynn. That was a spot where I don't think the Chargers were going to show up for that guy. He basically told him prior to the game, we don't really have anything to play for. We're not going to the playoffs or anything like that. We didn't see a max effort from the Chargers. We saw very little effort from the Chargers in that game. The Rams,
his game management and all the things, so many of the things that, and he's a terrific coordinator. I like Anthony Lynn, but I mean, his game management's a disaster. And I think you bring up a great point. That was like, I always make the analogy that the Chiefs, it's like they're fooling around a kitten with a toy, pawing around with it, and just hanging around. And you never, even though the game can be close, you never feel like it's in doubt. But that was Belichick against the rookie quarterback, and they just frustrated the heck out of the kid. For Herbert's sake, you got to really start saying, what's the answer here? We got to get a guy in here that can help the development of Herbert. And I think Lynn's days are numbered. Boy, you think about that. They're competitive and gave games away with just stupid stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, this is a team that the Chargers compete week in and week out. They're in close games. Whether they win them or not is kind of up in the air. They just weren't competitive last week.
Yeah.
And that says more about the Chargers than it does about New England to me. I think this line should be higher. I think this line should be 7, maybe even 7.5. I understand that there was some opposition to the Rams for their game against the Cardinals this past weekend. I was on the Rams. It was one of the 5 winners I had in the Circa. I think the Rams are coming into form. I think that this is a very solid defense. They grade very well, whether it's traditional metrics or advanced metrics, and they've figured it out with Jared Goff. Sean McVay has made adjustments. Everybody in the league copied Sean McVay for the last 2.5 years. This year, McVay's doing things a little bit differently. They're running the football very effectively. They've taken some of that pressure off of Goff. And the one thing that we know about Jared Goff, if you can pressure him, that's when you have success against him. New England does not generate a whole lot of pressure. I think Goff has time to sit back there in the rocking chair. They can run the football effectively. I don't think I can submit my Circa card on Thursday because of all the COVID stuff and all of that, because you have to have all 5 plays. But I do like the Rams -6 this week. It'll probably be a personal play in pocket.
Yeah, and then it's funny as we're talking about, I do believe the AFC is way better than the NFC. So, and it's funny how things go in segments of a season. Go back 6-7 weeks. We're standing there saying the NFC West, man, is that the best division in football? Well, Seattle stubbed their toe. Arizona's driven off a cliff. San Francisco, the injuries finally caught up with them, and it looked like they were making a big push here, and then Buffalo put it to them pretty good. And, the Rams team runs a little hot and cold. So we thought that division was great. Now the division as a whole has been stubbing their toe. Honestly, as we're talking it out, Bud, I'm kind of thinking the under sounds good. I don't see the Patriots doing much of anything. And I can see Belichick dialing something up to force Goff into some mistakes here and there. I mean, they're getting the running game going a little bit with Akers and Henderson. But, if you're betting on Belichick, I think you're betting on this game being low scoring. And it may not be enough for him to cover the spread, but if they have any chance, it's a defensive game. So maybe the under is the safer play, to be honest with you.
Well, the interesting thing about this game is going to be, New England doesn't have a great run defense, but we talk about Belichick trying to take something away. He may flood the box. He may tell his corners, you know what? You're in single coverage and figure it out. And he'll force Jared Goff to beat him. And I think the Rams do have enough personnel in that passing game to make that happen. So an interesting cat and mouse game, to be sure. Two very respected head coaches. And I just think that the Rams are just vastly superior to New England here, especially with the way that this game kind of sets up from a matchup standpoint. How about we go to Sunday here, and let's talk about the first game on the board, Green Bay and Detroit. Green Bay 7.5-point road favorite at Ford Field, total 55 for this one, Brian. And Detroit, look, you can say what you want about Chicago and the dumpster fire that they are, but Detroit found a way to get it done, looked more invested, looked more engaged without Matt Patricia. Are they going to, be a dangerous team, a thorn in the side of the Packers here this weekend?
Well, the question was going into the Lions game, do they get a bounce from the new head coach? And it seemed like the players did not like Patricia. And all of a sudden they showed up and the offense got going. I've not seen yet. We'll start finding out today whether Golladay comes back here for the stretch run. Not that they have anything to play for. Do they shut him down? But Stafford had a big game, and clearly maybe it's a team playing with house money here. And for Green Bay, they just been cruising right along. Maybe this is a dangerous spot for Green Bay. And based on what we saw last week, you would have to think a track meet's in order, hence 55 and a half. And that may be low.
Well, and I look at this game and I sort of look up and down the card just in general. And I know that we have some games that are a little bit higher total than you would want to play with teasers, but a lot of people are going to tease Green Bay down to 1.5. A lot of people are going to tease Tennessee down to 1.5. Maybe Chicago, you tease up to 7.5 or 8 with that low scoring expectation at Soldier Field. You got some games where you could tease like Kansas City down to 1.5, Tampa Bay to almost a pick 'em. New Orleans down to almost a pick 'em, stuff like that. I don't know if this will be a very popular week for straight bets, but teasers are going to be all over the place, and the books are going to be rooting for somebody to break those up. And I don't know if Detroit winds up being one of those somebodies, but I think Packers tease down to 1.5 will be one of the most popular plays of the week.
And like you said, there's always one of them that goes awry. And the question is, you have to determine, was that a one-game thing? And, by the way, they were playing the Bears who couldn't get out of their own way. Or is this Detroit team? Because don't forget the players, last year they had Kansas City and San Fran beat. They started fast and they fell apart. And then it's almost like there was a mini revolt there and they weren't playing for Patricia also. Maybe they are a completely different team. One game isn't enough for you to, with conviction, pull the trigger one way or the other, but it bears watching. And look what Atlanta's been ever since Raheem Morris jumped in there. So, the change of coach midstream, you got to pay attention to it.
Well, and I think something that's important to note here is I don't think players tank. I think coaches tank. I think coaches just either aren't prepared. Say what you will about Greg Williams and the cover zero and the all-out blitz against Derek Carr at the end of that game. But, the players are out there. They're playing for contracts. They're playing for playing time. They're playing for money. The players don't tank unless they have something they want to say. The Chargers had something they wanted to say, and that was, we don't want Anthony Lynn to be our head coach anymore. I don't think Detroit necessarily tanked, but it was pretty evident from a lot of the comments that they had been making and some of the efforts that we have seen. They didn't like Matt Patricia. They wanted him gone. Detroit may not be a good team, and they're probably not a good team. But with that being said, now that Patricia's gone, they have no reason not to play, because now they are playing for money. They are playing for, playing time with whoever the new head coach is, whatever the new regime looks like, stuff like that. So I think it's a very important distinction to make at this time of the year where you're going to have team. Let's take Jacksonville, for example. Does Doug Marrone keep that job? Probably not. But Jacksonville's played hard every week. They don't get blown out often. They play a lot of close games. It would be Jacksonville or nothing for me here in this Tennessee spot, even though Tennessee is clearly the better team, because I've seen no indication from the Jaguars that they want Doug Marrone gone. So it's very important to, sort of make those distinctions and draw those lines at this time of the year, because coaches on the hot seat are getting headlines. They are getting the mainstream media buzz, but it doesn't necessarily mean the players are going to buy in to, wanting that guy gone or buy into some sort of narrative.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Tennessee, because you and I told the story on my radio show out here yesterday. You and I had a conversation at halftime. I said, well, talk about being, if you're going to be wrong, go down in flames. And we were talking at halftime, and Tennessee was down 38-7. I said, I give them one series. If they don't go down and score, I'm pulling Derrick Henry. And you said, well, they should pull Tannehill. I go, yeah, just live to fight another day. It's not your day. Well, I learned a lot about Tennessee that day, because they did not quit. They just kept coming and coming and coming. And I learned more about Tennessee and that defeat than I did had they, beat the Browns by 14. And when you get to the playoffs, this is the team to me is a matchup nightmare, because they can run the football. And I think Vrabel, they play for Vrabel, man. He either one of two things. He either ripped the paint off the walls in the locker room at halftime, and I bet he didn't do that. I bet he didn't even go talk to him. I bet he didn't say one word, because they knew. And those players responded and didn't quit. That they were being embarrassed. Turn the page. Everybody will forget about it in 3 weeks. But the way they kept coming in that game, that speaks volumes to me. And then the other thing I would say to watch for, and I had a debate with somebody on Twitter. I was a Bills fan. Said, all that matters is Miami. They're talking for the Bills. And then somebody replied, well, no, but they're seeding, in an easier path. And I'm like, easier path? Seriously, what's the difference between playing Tennessee, Indianapolis, or Baltimore in the first round? You're in the AFC, you're going to play somebody really good. And there's only one bye. So to me, give Kansas City the bye. And then beyond that, good luck to you. You're gonna run a gauntlet no matter what you do, to the point where I believe once you win the division, for the Bills specifically, but I would rest guys. I'm starting in week 16. I honestly, God, listen, you get your home game, you win a division. I'm resting guys in week 16 and 17. Maybe they play a half or things like that. It doesn't matter to me, because there are no fans. A bye is a big deal, or playing at home is a big deal. Playing at home is not a big deal this year. There are not enough fans there to impact the way you approach the game. And personally, and you saw it last night, this is me, I think the Bills play better football on the road. I think they're one of those teams that they're really focused. The business trip and bonding and the whole 9 yards, they play with a level of intensity on the road that I think they're lacking in, where they have so many speed bumps and just get lackadaisical at home. I want them to go on the road. But watch for week 16 and 17, Adam. I mean this. Once teams are locked in, what's most important? Be healthy for the run. Because I'm not worried about having to go on the road. There are no fans.
Frankly, from Buffalo's standpoint, I'd rather play on the road, just because you don't know what you're going to get in January in Western New York. And, the defense has personnel, and they are getting healthier, as you and I talked about before we started recording here. But it's about Josh Allen. That running game has gotten better of late.
It's not
but
good
it's
enough.
about Josh Allen. And you want Josh Allen throwing in good weather because that gives you the absolute best chance to win. And it's why, even despite the line movement, the heavy action on San Francisco in last night's game, I liked Buffalo because Josh Allen was going to a controlled environment where, he was going to be able to put up numbers, and he absolutely did. And yeah, I mean, I think if I'm Buffalo, I'd much rather go on the road, although they're probably going to win that division and not really have that luxury, at least for their first game. But I totally agree with you.
The biggest angle that was out there that nobody took into consideration was the white face mask angle.
All right.
When made him all right. They made a big deal about it on social media. They looked faster. Didn't they look faster? No.
You know what?
They only did it once before. There's only one other time. They made a big deal of it, and I wonder if they'll do it the rest of the way because of their primetime game. But last year, they've always just worn the standard gray face mask. They did it last year. They were 1-0 coming in. They did it on Thanksgiving Day last year and murdered the Cowboys.
Well,
so
let me say this.
I use the white face mask angle.
You've talked about this before, and you talked about this on last week's show, and I know we talked about it, I think, when I did your Sports Grid show on Tuesday as well. Buffalo doesn't get primetime games. Buffalo has always been overshadowed, unless they're playing New England and they happen to get a primetime game out of that. They've always been overshadowed. And now they're getting them. And they've got another one here this week. And I think about that angle with the Browns on Monday night as well, where the Browns have an opportunity in front of a nationally televised audience to show how far they've come. Baltimore plays in this spotlight all the time. It's nothing special to them. It's nothing new to them.
That's right.
But for teams like Buffalo and Cleveland, I don't know if they're going to win. I don't know if Buffalo wins outright. I don't know if they cover. I don't know if Cleveland wins. I know one thing is for damn sure. We are going to get 110% efforts out of both of those teams here in week 14. And sometimes that's half the battle in the NFL, is knowing that a team's going to show up for you. I know Buffalo's going to show up. Now, I also know Pittsburgh's going to show up after losing their perfect record, losing that game to Washington. But I know Buffalo's going to be there. And to me, that makes the difference sometimes between a lean and a pick or something like that.
Well, I played the over last night because I was really leery of the Bills looking ahead to the Steelers. And because even though they were on Monday Night Football, they got the Steelers coming in, and I know they had that game circled. Steelers are coming in unbeaten. We're going to be the ones to take them out. I was convinced before last night's game the Bills were going to beat the Steelers, and I was really worried about last night. But the thing with Buffalo, they are dangerous now, Adam. They are getting healthy. Matt Milano was back in the lineup last night. He was all over the football field again. Edmonds had been hurt. And the amazing thing, I'm telling you, you watch Edmonds, their middle linebacker. This is remarkable. He's been their leading tackler for 3 years. He's 22 years old, Adam. When they drafted him, he was 19. You think of the upside of what that kid can become once the game slows down for him. I mean, and they dumped all this on him. The play caller is a 19-year-old, and he's been hurt. Milano's been hurt. Trey White was nicked up, and the Bills' defense has been running hot and cold. Now the new linemen they got are doing a better job against the run. They had the goal line stand last night. This defense is starting to make plays and create turnovers again. They're starting to get back to what they were. And the Bills' offense has just exploded onto the scene. They are a very dangerous football team.
They are. And Pittsburgh has been losing guys left and right on defense. They lose Dupree. Last night, Spillane gets hurt. They've kind of had some transition with their defense, and their offense is very pedestrian. It is a very average offense. James Conner, of course, didn't play last night, but even with Claypool and Smith-Schuster, the passing game is still grading out as pretty average. So now you got a Buffalo defense getting healthy, getting better, a Pittsburgh defense getting worse, a Buffalo offense that's been very good. And of course, we'll see what the weather forecast looks like for this one. But at least Josh Allen is mobile enough to get away from that pass rush. I think it's got to be Buffalo on Sunday Night Football. I think it has to be.
Well, and the one thing is, this is going to sound crazy. It's an analogy. And I'm not, talent-wise, it's no contest. But when you watch Kansas City, Hill and Kelsey are uncoverable. And if you do devote everything to cover them, Then you got Sammy Watkins or Hardman, running around like a reindeer in the secondary. They're nowhere near as electric as Kansas City. But Buffalo has the same thing. You got the mobile quarterback with the cannon arm, but they now have 5 wide receivers that are open. Kansas City always has someone open. And Buffalo now has a group of guys where someone is always open. Beasley is uncoverable. He's Edelman. He's today's version of Edelman, and Buffalo leads the league, I believe, in third down conversion success. And that's because Beasley is uncoverable. If you're putting a nickel guy on him or a linebacker, he's always open, move the chains. And then Diggs they're devoting so much attention to Diggs. And now the Davis kid is good. Isaiah McKenzie, who scored a touchdown last night, touches the ball 3 times a game at him. It's either a touchdown or a big play to move the sticks. And John Brown's out. When John Brown comes back, he's not Tyreek Hill, but he's their version of Tyreek Hill who can stretch the field. And now Allen knows how to go through his progressions. They're similar. Kansas City has the more electric guys, but Buffalo has the same concept that Kansas City's running, and Allen has the arm to get at the guys in windows if a guy is open.
Yeah, and the reason why I stayed off Buffalo in the circuit, which would have been a winning pick as well, is that John Brown was out, and their offense has been dramatically better with John Brown in the lineup here so far this year. I think a couple more games on IR for him, but he should be back for that playoff push as well. Speaking of Kansas City, let's talk about that Kansas City-Miami game real quickly here. 7.5, the predominant number, although you're paying some extra juice on Miami if you take the hook. Total on that one, 49.5. What do you think about Kansas City laying a road number heading to South Florida?
The only concern here is Kansas City lets teams hang around.
It's almost like they challenge themselves for fun.
It's like they're clowning around, but you never feel like the game's in doubt. I mean, go back. It's funny. If you go back, the Bills played them. The final score was 26-17. Was that a Tuesday game? That was one of those weird, and it was an afternoon game. And Kansas City pushed Buffalo around. The final was 26-17. But at the end of the game, Kansas City, even though they were in complete control of the game, it came down to a 3rd and 15 with 4 minutes to go in the game. And the Bills were down 6. And Jerry Hughes, blitzed, what are you doing? Contain. And Mahomes ran for the first down, and they tacked on a field goal, and the game was over. But Buffalo had a chance to get the ball back and go down and win the game. Denver had a chance to go down and win the game. The Raiders have been kind of their kryptonite a little bit. But they just have so many weapons, but they're not blowing anybody out. But I think this is the week they do, because as good as Miami's defense is, they've not seen anything like this. And honest to God, I mean, you can't knock what they're doing. I mean, they're winning football games, but I just watch this Miami thing and go, how sustainable is this? The Tua thing is all dink and dunk and manage the game, and we'll see what he becomes. I'm not piling on the guy. He's a rookie coming off of a Grizzly injury. But I think Fitzpatrick, in a game like this, I think Fitzpatrick gives you a better shot, because they're going to have to produce, you would think. If Miami's winning this game, right, if you were having a target saying, we got to score 27, 28 points to have a chance to win this game, a chance. And that's with Miami's defense playing great and creating some turnovers. I don't know Miami can do it.
No, and I mean, look, I had a perfect week in the circa, but I got lucky in a couple of situations. The Colts getting that turnover inside the 5, and then Miami, who had a million chances to put up points in that game against Cincinnati. Their red zone play calling was simply atrocious. Tua's decision-making in the red zone was bad. They were just fortunate to play a Cincinnati team that's so awful that they were able to cover that 11.5-point number.
If Burrow's playing in that game, since he wins by 10.
Yeah, and the thing of it is here, look, maybe Miami does move the ball. Maybe Tua puts them into scoring situations. If they walk away with 3 instead of 7, they sure as hell ain't covering this game. And that's what would be the worry for me with Miami in this spot, because Kansas City's getting 7. And if Miami's getting 3, and that happens over the course of the game, it's a 28-12, 28-17 type of game. And Kansas City, like you said, they don't blow a lot of people out. It feels like they can if they want to. I don't know if they want to here, but they may just accidentally do it just because of the red zone success.
Well, and I think you got to do, when you're playing a team like this too, you got to be willing to go outside the box a little bit. I mean, like Denver, you're sitting there going, what was it, 5-6 minutes ago in a game? It's 4th and 3 around midfield. I'm going for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's worked for 50 some minutes and we've hung around. We've given ourselves a chance. But at that point, 4th and 3, you got to say, well, if we'll trust the defense stops them if they get a field goal. But you got to take a chance. I mean, you got to go on the premise. I ain't getting it back. And KC moved the ball, took all the time off the clock and got the field goal. If they'd have gone for the 4th and 3 at midfield, maybe they get the first down, maybe they get the points and actually win the game. Or because they were at midfield, instead of punting it down to the 10, KC would have got off the field a lot sooner and they'd had more time to go down the field and maybe would have had a timeout or two at the end. I don't know. You got to think outside the box when you're a team like Denver playing a team like Kansas City.
Not to mention, you're not playing for anything as Denver.
I
Go
know.
for it. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, if your decision is to try to get 3 yards or give it back to Patrick Mahomes, you're trying to get 3 yards. You and I can just rant about coaches on every show, though.
What was the one game? It was a famous game eons ago, but it was Brady versus Manning. And Belichick went for it on 4th and whatever from his own 20. And they thought he was crazy, and they got it. And went down. I think they ended up winning the game. And Belichick said, I'd rather take my chances with Brady to get me a first down on 4th and 4 than give the ball back to Manning because we can't stop him. I mean, that's reading the situation in game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's something that you definitely have to do. One more game to ask you about here, Brian, and then we'll wrap things up for today. Minnesota and Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's 6.5-point favorite, 51.5 the total here. Now, I'm on record on this show multiple times over as saying that the bye week has actually been a detriment for a lot of teams. You can't practice. You can't do anything. You can't leave town, go on vacation because you're trying not to get COVID. Carolina, of course, coming off the bye, they've got some COVID cases. It's happened a lot with a lot of teams here so far this season. Nothing like that with Tampa Bay. Maybe the bye is a good thing for Tampa Bay because they've had a lot of issues going on. Is it a good enough thing for you to trust them laying 6.5 here against a competitive Minnesota squad?
You know, the problem is with Minnesota, you've got Cook who he can light you up himself. And then Cousins can do good things, but Cousins can implode. I'm inclined to agree with you at this late date for a team like Tampa Bay. I don't know so much about this week, but I think this bye coming now is a godsend for them. You know, it's a little longer in the tooth with Brady and Gronkowski. And I would envision Brady's work ethic and the way he is. And like you said, there's really nowhere you could go or do anything. I bet you they actually did a lot of healthy work in this bye week to get better. I wouldn't think this was, putting your feet back and, just hanging out at home and, hey, you're off for 4 days. I bet you there was a lot of film study and, Brady maybe even doing more work with Antonio Brown to get him involved or things of that nature. I don't know how it applies to this week's game, but I think this bye will benefit Tampa Bay in the stretch run. And then the question to me becomes, I know you asked me about this game. I don't have a real opinion on it. How dangerous is Tampa Bay? Is that experience something that can make noise when the playoffs get here? Because it's been a roller coaster ride for them. It's either, but man, they look great or they look horrible. I mean, they murdered the Packers, and everybody has a great day. Everybody has a bad day. And that was the Packers' bad day. I'm curious. I don't know. What do you think? How dangerous is Tampa Bay here down the road?
I think it's a hard question to answer just because I don't know what Brady has in the tank. But what I can tell you about this game is I actually like Tampa Bay. And I've been pretty adamant going against Tampa Bay, thinking that they're overrated over the last few weeks. Two reasons I like Tampa Bay. The first is, again, I think the bye week is an advantage here for them as an older team where they got it. And I think back to when the NHL started incorporating bye weeks, and teams would come off the bye and they would just get smoked. I mean, we were printing money with that trend of teams coming off the bye against a team that was playing. It was easy money, the easiest money I've ever seen in this business. But the teams that had later bye weeks started to adjust, and they were like, you know what? We're seeing this. We got to figure some things out so this doesn't happen to us. I think for Tampa Bay, when you look at how teams had struggled off the bye, like weeks 7 through 11, 7 through 12, I think teams that have had the late buys have kind of adjusted. Buffalo had a late buy. They played well. There's some other teams that kind of fit into that mold. I think teams are just realizing, what they have to do to navigate the bye week and be okay. So I think that benefits Tampa Bay here. The second thing is that prior to last week's game, Alexander Mattison was ruled out for Minnesota. And it was one of those things where one of the beat writers, and this is one of the reasons why I took Jacksonville at the last minute, one of the beat writers said, Dalvin Cook's been playing beaten up. Dalvin Cook's been playing hurt. He's been taking a lot of bumps and bruises. Dalvin Cook had 32 carries last week in that game against Jacksonville. They needed him, and they needed every one of them. So I think Dalvin Cook is very banged up going into this game against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay can get pressure, can make Cousins uncomfortable. I think this is actually a play-on spot for the Buccaneers, and I usually don't like laying big chalk like this, and not this year off the bye. But I think this is one where Tampa Bay is set up really nicely, actually.
As we wrap it up, right? But I would say, I wonder if the NFC East, being such a dog's breakfast, actually didn't have impact around the entire conference, where a team say, the division's gone, but we're fine. We're going to get in. The NFC East is so bad. And you sit here and you look right now, Minnesota and Arizona at 6-6 are, Minnesota's the 7th seed, Arizona's the 8th seed, and Arizona's in free fall. But a team like the Bucks, and I know they're all fighting for the division in the West. I just wonder if that NFC East thing, because so many more spots are open because a whole division was out, if that impacted other teams with sustained intensity week in, week out. We'll get them next week.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. And again, it's a tough card. A lot of teaser options here on this week's card for week 14. But this highlight video here talking about a lot of things for week 14 over on our ATS YouTube page. Subscribe over there and make sure you subscribe to the full editions of ATS Radio, which you can find on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever you stream and download your podcast content.